Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome to Module 4, Session 2, Understanding Gestall's Principles, Closer. Let's dive in. In our previous session, we have tried to understand what are Gestall's principles, right? What are different segments within Gestall's principles, and how these are very much important for any kind of visual designer or graphic designer to understand the perception of human psychology while they're creating any kind of artwork or any kind of informations, right? And how do you get benefits using Gestall's principles in your compositions such that it's more it's making more sense in terms of usability, and how the idea of hierarchy contrast again to other principles plays an important role in terms of understanding the overall idea. So primarily we have talked about figure and ground, where we have also explored how figure and ground plays an important role together to create a better narrative. We have talked about again Noma Bar, right? Seigyo Fukuda, their artworks, how it impacted in terms of creating a visual engagement. Apart from that, you can also see how the idea of figure and ground, if taken in a very understanding way, you have many opportunities to explore and utilize the space in your composition in a creative way. With this, we'll come to the second session, which is closer, and we'll look how closer also plays an important role in terms of any kind of composition for a visual designer. So, in principle of closure, the definition is that the principle of closure in Gestall's psychology explain how our brain naturally completes incomplete shapes or patterns to perceive them as a whole. This is very interesting because if you see on the right side, there is a figure, right? And by now, I'm pretty sure you all have figured out that this image, which is in a fragmented phase, right, is a star. And that's how quickly our brain comprehends and give us meaning. Although if you see the overall anatomy, if you see the fragmented representation, it doesn't complete exactly like a star, right, visually. But your brain has already created that connection, that relationship, and understood that pattern, and it has created a virtual image in your brain saying if you connect xyz spaces, right, if you see if this can be connected, this becomes actually a star. And that's the power of our brain, and this is what principles of closure talks about, like how we quickly understand or recognize patterns, and with that how we create meaning even though the meaning can be in a fragmented state. So when we encounter fragmented or missing visual elements, our mind instinctively fills the gaps to create a cohesive and recognizable form. This mental process relies on familiarity, context, patterns, allowing us to interpret visuals even when the parts and the informations are absent. Primarily when we consider such kind of things, again our brain tries to analyze whether we have an exposure to such kind of things in the past. Say for example, if we as a graphic designer have never encountered the anatomy of a star in a 2D environment, definitely it would have been struggle for us whether what is the image is about, right? it may become very difficult to comprehend, to understand what the image is about. Maybe we will perceive it as it is, not filling the gaps. So that also depends. So whenever we are trying to understand the concept of closure, somewhere or the other, it also reflects our past experience, and based on that our brain will try to create images, or it will try to give us cues such that we can create a meaning out of it. So as we have talked about in the past sessions, right, Gestalt law is about the perception, how we humans are good in creating meaning, right? The one which we have talked about is like to find out order in a chaos, right? So basically, if there's a chaotic environment, somewhere or the other, our brain will also try to understand the patterns and try to create meaning out of it. And this is a very good example where I would say most of you have already figured out that although the elements which are there in the fragmented state are not complete star, but your brain has already created that meaning and it's complete in that way. So this is what it talks about, the closure. So this again will go in segments. So within closure, how different elements are associated with it, and we as a visual designer, what are the things we need to consider, or areas which are already done and we can take inspiration from to create the concept of closure. So so the first point is broken shapes, right? So as we have taken the previous example of how we quickly created the stars, similarly here, if you see, your brain has now quickly created a image of a sphere, and that too in a 3D space, so that you can sense the element to have some kind of light to it, even though it's just a 2D image where the strokes are just thick and thin, right? But these are structured in such a way that this gives us a feeling of a sphere with the essence of light in it. So it projects us the overall composition mostly towards the essence of 3D. But I won't say it's a direct depiction, it gives us that feeling of it. So now if we add some kind of details, mostly in 3D, so we'll see that. And this gives more clarity to the compositions, right? And without that also, your brain has tried to comprehend whether this is a sphere or a square quickly. And within that also, your brain has also comprehended that, okay, it has some kind of light to it. And if you see the detail here, when I add a 3D element to that, right? Exactly, this is what our brain has tried to achieve or try to create meaning out of it. But to be frank, these are just thick and thin lines which are arranged in a structure way which gives us a sense of a sphere, that too in a 3D. So principle of closure again is about that, like how we try to create a meaning out of broken shapes. So this is one of the example of broken shapes. Yes, so I'm pretty sure all of you know about this logo, or most of you have encountered this logo, right? And this is again a logo of WWF, again World Wildlife Fund, right? And here you can see how the idea of the panda is being completed again, even though the details of covering this anatomy is missing, right? So if you see the top portion of the head area, right, there are no lines associated to this. Again, towards its back, right, towards its back, there is no line. But our brain has quickly understood the overall given shape, right, and with minimal representation. And this is very, very important, how designers take the benefit of minimal representation, the idea of simplicity, if you understand the concept of closure. So if you are good in understanding the concept of closure, definitely somewhere or the other you will try to adapt it, and that will bring simplicity in your overall representation, and it will give the exact meaning, even though if you are trying to add the details to it. So it reduces the complexity of your artwork or a composition or any kind of information, and somewhere or the other that is very much beneficial for the overall representation. because you are looking at the minimal way to address the idea in an impactful representation, right? Yes, so this is another example of IBM. I hope all of you know about IBM. IBM is a renowned brand who deals with like softwares development, right? Especially nowadays, they are into AI and many other services associated to industries, especially in terms of information technology. And you can see these are some of their iconography. I have taken a screenshot from their website, and there you can easily see how their different representation with the concept of closure. And typically any kind of icons have a specific dimension, right? Especially if you consider any kind of screens, digital screens, right? And primarily these are very much smaller in shape, and adding the principle of closure while you are exploring or you are iterating with the anatomy of icons in any kind of digital platform will definitely benefit you in terms of understanding or exploring or projecting the idea in a much simpler and effective way. So here you can see here, right, in this is a magnifying glass, right? Along with that, there are some kind of dot and line, and since we are quite exposed, we have past experiences of how dot such kind of representations are again associated to writing or text, right? So again, IBM Watson Discovery is their segment, and within this segment, this is the icon which they have finalized. And it's interesting to see how your brain has already understood that this is a magnifying glass, even though the anatomy of glass is not complete, right? If you see the here, and again it's overlap, so again there's a complexity here. So the overall representation is again it's 2D, but your brain has already perceived it's like, okay, the texts are overlapping the icon. Okay, so that's an interesting take. Again, the idea of closure, how it also helps us to visualize things which are not in 2D, but to visualize that in 3D. And that's the power of closure. So again, here similarly, you can see a chat box here, right? Where chat bubble, in fact. So where you can see the edges here is not connected, but still we have already perceived, because we have a previous exposure where we have encountered such kind of box, especially when we read comics and some kind of articles, graphic novels which are associated to that, and we somehow or the other we can relate with the idea. And again, this is very much abstract, but since we have a past experience or exposure to such kind of box or bubble, it becomes easier for us, even though the details are not completely done. So even these details are not completely finished, your brain has already created the image of the 2D representation to 3D, and this also benefits. So it feels like it's like coming out of the screen, like it has a essence of emboss, right? And because of that, again, the concept of closure is enabling that perception. And as we have talked about, we are good in comprehending complex images to a simpler representation, and this is a very good example for that. Yes. So next example is related to logo, right? So again, we are in the same segment of broken shapes. So people who don't know about Rajasthan, Rajasthan is a state of one of the renowned state, in fact, of India. And here, this is actually a tourism logo. So typically nowadays, state tourism promotion, country tourism promotions, city tourism is also mostly highlighted by the governments of different region. And this is again initiative by the government of India along with state governments, right, to promote the culture of tourism, highlighting the richness of the place, highlighting the heritage, the culture, everything. So here, this is a very good example of Rajasthan. So if I am new to Rajasthan, if I have no exposure, no understanding of Rajasthan, somewhere or the other, our brain quickly creates a mental image of this portion. So if you see this portion, right, you can quickly see an anatomy of a face with eyes, and a mustache, right? And this mustache is, again, it's an abstract representation. If you see from far, when you see the detail, again, it feels like two camel facing opposite to each other, right? And this is very, very interesting because the Rajasthani culture, if you see, if you explore, you will definitely see adults, elders having this kind of mustache, primarily in the rural or suburban areas of Rajasthan. And this is their cultural representation. Primarily, this is the visual culture of there. And since Rajasthan has some desert area also, most of the segments are covered with deserts. So again, for commute, you will see many camels to be part of it. Along with that, there are birds, migratory birds, which comes and goes. Again, there are some of the local birds which are there, and it has beautifully captured the essence, the biodiversity of it, along with the community, right? You can see the presence of the community here. And again, the tagline is Jane Kya Dikh Jai, like it's very uncertain what you will encounter. So that's the tagline. So and this is what they have projected, and see the simplicity. So just to explain this logo, it is taking me time, right? But with the carefully smart craft of the concept of closure, they have enabled the depth of the representation in a very, I would say, engaging way. And this is how you can take the benefit of principles of design, elements of design, and Gestalt principles. And if you have a better understanding, if you explore too much, definitely you will reach at a point where you are playing with those kind of understanding, and with the idea of simplicity, you are trying to project the overall information in a more engaging way. Yeah, so as I was talking about, the culture has some kind of correlation, right? So this is one of the elder photo which was clicked by Alan, and you can see here how the essence of mustache is prevail. And if you have any doubt, you can see there is a registration of a bike, which is also RJ, which is full form for Rajasthan. And that's how you can see the community there, and primarily most of the elders and adults have this kind of mustache, and it's a reflection of that, and it's a very thoughtful and careful crafting of such kind of representation. Apart from that, again, as I said, camels are quite observed in most of the areas, because yeah, there are deserts which are available in the space of Rajasthan. And it's again, this is how they might have considered, like how those two can play important role, again, in an abstract way, how to define the idea of the culture. And finally, this is what you can feel the essence. So if I'm new, if I go there, definitely the logo creates a relationship, basically. So if I haven't explored the Rajasthan, definitely I will connect with the logo when I visit there. And that's a very important, I would say, feeling, where the graphic designer or visual designers can take a role in terms of creating a better communication with the space visually. Yeah, so again, this is another representation of closure, and this is one of the brand which is associated to ice cream, right? And you can see here how it's playing an important role in terms of minimal representation, and this is a very interesting composition. You can see the dynamic representation of it, right? Although there are no lines, your brain has already created an image of the overall anatomy of this van, right? And this is a very unique way how you can compose things with minimal elements, but again, it gives the overall representation in a very interesting way. And that's what you can also look into if you're jumping yourself, or you are trying to explore yourself in the idea of graphic design. So principle of closure is very much beneficial for simplistic and minimal representation, although keeping the essence which or the context which you are trying to achieve in a very playful and engaging manner. Yeah, so with this, we'll also look into another example. Again, this is a beautiful representation of that, where the alphabet A is again associated with steps. And this is by Altitude Volvo. It's a car dealership in Australia. And this was designed by Pigeon, David Pigeon, who is a graphic designer. And this dealership primarily focuses on taking customer service to a highest level. That's the philosophy, and you can sense it, like since this is a service company, again to the highest level is again depicted in an abstract way of steps. And you can see how the anatomy of the typeface again speaks a different meaning when you understand what's the overall vision of that particular brand, right? And this is where you can play along with the concept, keeping a more impactful, but again, a simplistic way with a less elements, but with the overall complete meaning, right? And since we are good in comprehending such kind of complexity, this becomes very much easily processed rather than being confused. Okay. Yeah, so this is again an interesting composition. If you see, done by Wendy Nees again, where this seems to be an alphabet, right? A, B, C, and see the anatomy here. How interestingly it's broken, but again we can easily read it, and it's not natural in that way. But again, although their complexity, we are good in breaking down those complexity and comprehending and try to create such kind of meaning. So a designer's role is to understand to what point we can break and understand that complexity to a point that it's totally irrelevant now and we are unable to understand what you are trying to do. And there comes your experience, and this doesn't happen in one day. You have to do multiple explorations, and you have to also talk with your with the community or people, whether they are able to connect or not, right? Or the organizations, and then collaboratively you will decide whether this is the right way or not, and you will do multiple exploration trials. And this is a very interesting process, because initially you might feel this is the way you want to represent, but visually if people are unable to connect, it doesn't make sense. So my suggestion is, like, if you're jumping into the idea of exploring graphic design, try to explore a lot in terms of anatomy. If you're providing a new set of anatomy or shapes or elements, make sure it's comprehended in a nice way rather than creating better more complexity. So yeah, this elements which examples are showing in this case has some kind of complexity, but again it's very easy for us to comprehend it. So you have to be very much careful how you map those things, like to a point where it makes sense and suddenly now it doesn't make sense. So you have to map that to a point that it becomes meaningful. Yes, so this is again a logo, which is again interesting to see, like in terms of how the broken elements were taken into consideration. And the full name is Centerelli and Co. Advertising Agency in France, and it was designed by Studio Epilio. And you can see how the use of a modern way of typography has been explored, where it's turning a blind eye to past the fades in graphic design. And you can see how the letter from form are very much broken, but still you can read it somewhere or the other if you give time, and your brain can easily comprehend the expression. And because of this, now it becomes more interesting and it becomes more engaging. People will definitely stop by and look into it and try to analyze it, and it stays for you in your brain, and it creates a different set of uniqueness in terms of representing the idea. So as we have talked, right, so somewhere or the other there should be a sense of uniqueness when you do something, such that it creates more engagement. So this can be one way you can look into, where it's more exploratory in that way. But if you are able to attain the meaning, right, in a proper way, that means you are successful in addressing that. Yes, since we have talked about IBM, now we are IBM's iconography. Now, in terms of incomplete numbers or letters, we are also looking at the logo here. So, if you see the logo has been designed by Paul Rand. I think I have talked about him in the previous session. Here, you can easily see how only the stripes are structured in such a way that it has the essence of a slab serif, right? Where you can see the alphabet IBM's anatomy clearly. And this is a very good example for closure where your brain has already filled up the space, the empty or the negative space which are there, and it has quickly provided you the meaning and the anatomy of the alphabets which are added here. And this is where the role of designer again comes into understanding how to what extent. So maybe if the stripes are quite thicker in size, maybe it may not be so much of engaging, or if the stripes are too less, maybe we might not be able to understand the anatomy here. So this is a very trial and exploratory works where you have to also understand how many variations you can take into consideration to finalize one. Okay. Yes, again, the letter broken is mentioned here, but again, the anatomy is totally missing, and the concept itself speaks about the idea of broken, right? And easily your brain can comprehend this, irrespective of the missing representation of the anatomy, right? So that's the another thing which you can also look into, like how you can play along with the idea of typography using the principle of closure. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure you have seen such kind of representation when we go or we try to understand weather. So even in weather, if some reporters are talking about wind flow and all, such kind of dotted lines or flowy lines are used to depict the wind flow, right? And apart from that, here also you can see how although the lines are not like in one stroke, it's broken, right? It's dot and dash, right? And although it's dot and dash, you can easily comprehend ki, okay, this particular line is associated to this, it's not with the other one, right? Again, here two lines are almost about to touch, but again, when you see this arrow, you understand that this line is associated to this is not associated to this, right? And parallelly you will connect this line to this particular point. And again, this plays an important role for designers to use minimal complexity. So suppose, say for example, you are asked to design some kind of map or path. If your elements are quite heavy already, maybe a dotted line can help you to create less, I would say, element heavy. Or the idea is anyways will be projected even though it's dotted line, right? And typically each line has some kind of semiotic connection. So if you are trying to fold a paper, if you're suggesting somebody to fold a paper, maybe straight line might not help. Dotted line will definitely help them to understand that it's not about sharp cut but just a fold. So in that case also, how lines create different meaning, different associations based on our past experience and exposure, right? So I'm pretty sure in the previous session you have understood how lines can play important role. Similarly here, the idea of closure can be attained, right? Using variations of lines to create different meaning. Again, the idea of dotted or broken lines. So in our streets, as you can see, this is a zebra crossing, right? How this line again shows a path for the pedestrians, right, to cross. And this is where again in real life scenario, how the concept of a closure plays an important role. And you being a designer can take the benefit of it may be in different contexts until unless you understand the overall utilization in a much comprehensive way. So now we are about to end this session, and before ending it, we'd like to recap what we have learned. So primarily, we have talked about how the idea of closure is very important. in any kind of compositions for simplicity and I would say impactful design. And Gestalt principles of closure highlights the brain's ability to perceive incomplete images as a complete, emphasizing our innate drive to seek order and meaning in visual stimuli. The principle is pivotal for visual designers as it allows them to craft minimal, engaging, and easily recognizable designs by strategically omitting details while still conveying the intended message. So when we were talking about different logos, right, different compositions, you can see the details were not exactly how we perceive visually, but still our brain can comprehend such kind of details, which becomes more simplistic and less crowded. So whenever you are struggling in any kind of compositions where you feel that you can use closer to omit the crowded compositions, definitely you should try exploring that. And that's why most of the good logos, or I would say engaging logos, always try to cater the idea of closer, because it's the element of surprise which also helps us to engage. And when you see logos like the one which we have talked about, right, the one with the van, right, so here the overall anatomy of the van, if you see, it's not depicted using lines, but the compositions are arranged in such a way that you can sense the overall anatomy of the van. So that's the simplicity which I am talking about, where it's not necessary to directly depict the concept of line, but by using the concept of closure, you can definitely create the essence of such kind of thing in a very, I would say, intended purpose. Okay. An effective use of closure can make logos, interface, and artistic composition more dynamic and memorable. As you can recall, all the logos are very much interesting in nature, and it gives us a memory to understand or perceive the idea in a longer way, and as it invites the viewer to participate in completing the image also. So by leveraging this principle, designer can simplify complex visual create intriguing design and ensure their works communicate effectively across the diverse contexts. And with this, we will conclude this session. Thank you for your time. I hope you all have got some idea about closure as a Gestalt's principles and why it's important. We'll end this session here. The next session will be learning about principles of similarity in Gestalt's. So, thank you. Goodbye.